please.
And thanks for giving me an opportunity to come in at this stage. I want to speak strongly in support of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission's Gender Pay Information Bill before us. And I was struck, of course, a few weeks ago, at the charity Dress for Success Dublin. It launched its #WorkEqual campaign, and said that, of course, on the 13th of November, the women of Ireland were effectively working for free for the remainder of 2018. And while our own gender pay gap of almost 14% is lower than the European average of almost 17%, it's still far too high. Across Europe, of course, the gender pay gap ranges from just 5.2% in Romania up to, and we have an annual, of course, European Equal Pay Day each year now since 2011. The bill before us, of course, was brought forward by our colleague Senator Ivana Bacik and her Labour colleagues, and I believe it is superior to the Minister's the Gender Pay Gap Information Bill, which is undergoing pre-legislative scrutiny in the Justice Committee currently. The heads of the government bill, of course, were published on genderequality.ie at the start of June, and the Minister said during your speech, I think in the Shannon, and I quote, that the trust and philosophy behind both bills are exactly the same. The government's bill, however, it would amend the Employment Equality Acts 1998 to 2015, but would only apply to companies, as I understand anyway, with no fewer than 250 employees. And in the Shannon debate, of course, Senator Bacik, she agreed that her fundamental objective in bringing forward the bill was, and I quote, "We all wish to see, full pay transparency legislation." And I understand she met you and your officials to see how you could work together to progress the most legally sound bill. I know that the Senator also said that given the gender pay gap had only narrowed by 4 percentage points in the past 11 years, that at this rate of progress it will take us 170 years, in fact, to close it completely. And as the National Women's Council has said, of course, we just can't wait. I believe Senator Bacik's bill is superior to the current government bill because it provides for the publishing of information on gender pay gaps in companies with no fewer than 50 employees. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know in Iceland, I think it's 25, so it's even smaller companies. So I want to agree with the National Women's Council again that this should be reduced, and at the least it would cover far more companies than provided for in the original government bill. The subsection, of course, 4 of 32A sets out the type of information in the bill to be published, including differences in mean hourly rates, median hourly rates, bonuses, etc. And subsection 5 provides for the status of employees to also be included in the breakdown referencing the ages of employees and whether they're full-time or part-time. And this will be particularly interesting, Minister, given the over-representation of women in part-time employment and in the precariat, huge and growing precariat area of working people. And also, as I said, given the increasing use of if and when contracts. Subsection 6, of course, provides for the imposition of a Class A fine on conviction, and subsection 7 provides for the publication of the name of the employer of at least 100 staff who contravenes provision. But again, we're not sure why there's the difference between here for employers who between, say, 50 and 99 staff. Why aren't effectively all eligible employers not liable to be publicly named if they're not complying with the law? I recently spoke on the excellent gender budgeting report which was produced by our Budgetary Oversight Committee, of which I'm a member, and which was worked extensively on by our Parliamentary Budget Office. Indeed, examining gender and equality budgeting has been a big part of our remit this past year in the committee. And we heard from many distinguished stakeholders, including the Women's Council, members of the Scottish Parliament who've taken a particular interest in this, IHREC, the Disability Federation and the Wheelchair Association. And we had hoped, of course, that Minister Donoghue, he would have produced a gender budgeting report alongside Budget 2019. That was a fundamental recommendation that we made to him, and hopefully it's something that will happen along with green budgeting as well from now on. And of course there are the 6 pilot projects on equality budgeting being undertaken in a number of departments, including business, enterprise, innovation, transport, tourism and sport, children and youth affairs, culture, heritage and Gaelic, education, skills and health. But just over, it's under 2 million, I think, that we spent on these government programmes, which include initiatives like requiring more apprentices to be available to young women to take up. The CSO, of course, produced the piece on historical earnings from 1938 to 2015, which included an earnings by gender. And, of course, between 1942 and 2007, female industrial workers earned less weekly compared to their male colleagues significantly. And that significant difference, of course, in 1942 of 79, equivalent of €79, it jumped to €215 in 2007, although the percentage gap did decline. But earlier this year, of course, a marketing survey, Alternatives, released the results of a survey it carried out, which showed that in the marketing and advertising sectors, men are more likely to receive a higher wage and additional non-salary benefits, and that tends to be the case, as I think Deputy Martin was saying, about many professions across the public and private sectors. So in 2017, of course, we were reviewed, Minister, by the UN for compliance with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and IHREC reported on the 14% gender pay gap, 38% gender pension gap, and the prevalence of women in lower paid and precarious jobs. In fact, we know from that report and from our own evidence that lone parents are much more likely to live in poverty or at risk of poverty, and yet the government should consistently introduce measures that would continue to harm this cohort of women. In fact, that was one of the characteristics of the austerity government since 2011, that most vulnerable cohort of women were damaged most of all, and that we still haven't undertaken fundamental reforms, such as the situation of women returners, women who are out of the workforce for a number of years and don't have access to programmes like community employment. We've done nothing about that year after year after year. So I think that there's a lot of ground to make up. This bill, however, is an important step, and along with hopefully with the Minister's initiatives, that we will arrive at a vast improvement in this area. I mentioned there Iceland. In fact, I think the Icelanders, they introduced a gender equality law in mid-2017, and it's mandatory for companies, SMEs with over 25 employees to obtain an equal pay certification, and it's seeking to eradicate, it's got a target of 2022, Minister, to eradicate gender pay differences. And we've seen, as so many reports, including in the UK, where the outrageous differences in pay between, for example, women presenters in the BBC across a whole range of activities. So the legislation that Senator Bacic and the Labour Party have introduced, it's another, hopefully, small but important step towards transparency, and it echoes the thrust, of course, of the bill I introduced myself in the last Dáil, which is a High Pay and Wealth Commission bill. So I want to warmly support Senator Bacic's bill and the Labour Party, and commend them for the work on it. Thanks, Can.